Imagine standing in front of a mirror, completely defeated. You are 27 years old. You are wearing a pair of cream-colored pants that you spent way too much money on, hoping they would make you look professional. But instead, they are showing lines and bulges that make you want to crawl back into bed. You have $5,000 to your name, not 5 million, not 500,000, just $5,000, saved up from 7 years of humiliation. That is the starting line. That is where the story begins. Not in a boardroom, not in an Ivy League classroom, but in a humid, cramped apartment in Florida, staring at a reflection that just didn't look right. Most people would just change their pants. Most people would sigh, complain to a friend, and go to work. But this story isn't about most people. This is about what happens when frustration meets desperation, and desperation meets an unstoppable force of will. This is the story of how a door-to-door fax machine salesperson, a woman who had zero connections in the fashion industry, zero business education, and zero safety net, turned a pair of scissors and a crazy idea into a $1.2 billion empire. Let's rewind to the reality of her life before the billions. Sara was selling fax machines. If you are too young to remember fax machines, just imagine trying to sell a piece of technology that everyone hates to people who don't want to talk to you. For 7 years, her daily routine was a masterclass in rejection. She would wake up, put on her uncomfortable pantyhose because that was the mandatory dress code, grab her heavy bag, and walk into office buildings uninvited. She would walk up to the receptionist, put on a fake smile, and try to pitch a machine. And do you know what happened? She would get escorted out by security. She would have business cards ripped up in her face. She would be yelled at, ignored, and laughed at. This wasn't once a month. This was every single day for 7 years. But here's the thing about rejection that most people miss. Most people let rejection break them down. They let it erode their confidence until they are nothing but a shell. Sara did something different. She let the rejection callous her mind. She realized that hearing the word no didn't actually kill her. She realized that she could be embarrassed, she could be thrown out of a building, and 10 minutes later, she would still be alive. She would still be breathing. This immunity to embarrassment became her superpower. While she was dragging those fax machines around Florida in the sweltering heat, she was suffering. Not just from the rejection, but physically. The pantyhose she had to wear were a nightmare. In the Florida humidity, they were hot. They rolled down, and the seam across the toe looked terrible in open-toed sandals. But she liked the way the control top made her figure look. It smoothed everything out. It was a paradox. The foot part was ruining her shoes, but the top part was making her clothes fit. One night, getting ready for a party, she looked at those expensive cream pants again. She knew she couldn't wear them without the control top, but she couldn't wear the pantyhose with her open-toed shoes. In a moment of pure improvisation, she grabbed a pair of scissors. She cut the feet right off the pantyhose. She put them on. The control top did its job. Her pants looked great. Her toes were free. She went to the party, but all night long the pantyhose kept rolling up her legs because there was no elastic band at the bottom to hold them down. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it was kind of a disaster. But in that disaster, she saw a glimmer of gold. She realized that every woman she knew had this problem. Every woman wanted the slimming effect without the torture of the feet. She looked around and realized that the billion-dollar undergarment industry was run mostly by men who had never worn pantyhose a day in their lives. They were designing products on mannequins, not real moving bodies. This was the moment, the spark. She had $5,000 in savings. That was her life savings. She made a decision that would terrify 99% of the population. She decided to bet it all, not on a stock, not on a house, but on an idea that lived in her head. She kept her day job selling fax machines because she had bills to pay. But by night, she became a researcher. She needed a prototype. She went to fabric stores, buying elastic and lace, trying to figure out how to make a version that didn't roll up the leg. She sat on the floor of her apartment for weeks, sketching and cutting. But having a prototype is useless if you can't make it. She needed a manufacturer. This is where the story usually ends for people. They have a great idea, but they don't know how to build it, so they give up. Sara took a week off from her fax job. She told everyone she was going on vacation. She didn't go to the beach. She went to North Carolina. At the time, North Carolina was the hosiery capital of America. She had a list of mills. She got in her car and drove from factory to factory. Imagine this scene. A young woman with no appointment walking into these massive, dusty textile mills run by old-school industry veterans. She pitches them her idea, footless pantyhose. Every single one of them said no. They didn't just say no. They looked at her like she was crazy. One mill owner actually asked her, "And who are you?" She said, "I'm Sara, I have an idea." They laughed. They told her that if this was a good idea, the big companies would have already done it. They told her she knew nothing about textiles. They told her to go home. She visited every mill on her list. Every single one rejected her. She went back to her hotel room defeated. It felt like the fax machine sales all over again. But remember, she had been training for this for 7 years. She didn't pack her bags. She didn't cry. She just recalculated. 2 weeks after she got back to Florida, her phone rang. It was a man from one of the mills in North Carolina, the same man who had dismissed her. He said, "I've decided to give you a chance." Sara was shocked. She asked, "Why?" "You hated the idea." He said, "I have 3 daughters. I told them about your crazy idea at dinner, and they told me I was an idiot if I didn't make it. They said they would buy it." That is the power of the market. The experts didn't see it, but the customers did. Now she had a manufacturer, but she had a new problem. She needed a patent. She called patent attorneys in Atlanta. They wanted $5,000 just to get started. That was her entire savings. If she paid the lawyer, she couldn't pay for the product. So she did what she had to do. She went to Barnes & Noble. She bought a book called Patents and Trademarks. She sat in her apartment and wrote the patent herself. When she finally found an attorney who would agree to file it for a discounted rate, he couldn't believe it. He told her later that he thought she was being pranked by a TV show because she was so unusual. She saved $3,000 by writing it herself. She used that money to pay for the packaging design. And let's talk about that packaging. In the late 90s, hosiery packaging was boring. It was beige, white, or gray. It featured photos of sleeping women or ethereal, soft-focus models. Sara walked into the stores and looked at the shelves. They were a sea of sameness. She knew that if she put her product in a beige box, it would die. She chose red. Bright, bold, screaming red. She used cartoons instead of photos. She put 3 different animated women on the cover with different body shapes. Everyone told her she was wrong. The industry experts said, "You can't use red, that's for Christmas or sale items. It screams cheap." They said, "You can't use cartoons, it's not sophisticated." Sara ignored them. She trusted her gut. She knew she needed to pop off the shelf. Then came the name. She wanted something catchy. She knew that the K sound in comedy is funny. Think of Coca-Cola, Kodak. It sticks in the brain. She was driving in her car, brainstorming, Spanx. It sounded a bit naughty, a bit funny, and very memorable. She changed the K's to an X because it looked cooler. Spanx, she had the product, she had the name, she had the packaging. Now she needed a store. She targeted Neiman Marcus, the holy grail of luxury retail. She managed to get a meeting with the buyer in Dallas. She flew out there wearing her lucky red backpack from college because she couldn't afford a briefcase. She walked into the meeting and she could feel she was losing them. The buyer was polite but bored. It was just another pair of pantyhose to her. In a moment of pure adrenaline, Sara stopped the presentation. She looked at the buyer and said, "You know what? I can't explain this to you. I have to show you. Will you come to the bathroom with me?" The buyer was stunned, but she was curious. They walked into the ladies' room. Sara went into a stall, put on her product under her white pants, and walked out. The difference was instant. The buyer saw the smooth lines. She saw the confidence. She looked at Sara and said, "I get it. It's brilliant." Neiman Marcus placed an order. This was the big break, but there was a catch. They agreed to put it in 7 stores. If it didn't sell, she was out. Sara didn't leave it to chance. She was still working her fax machine job, but she called every friend she had in those 7 cities. She sent them money. She said, "Go to Neiman Marcus, buy the product. I don't care what you do with it, just buy it." It worked. The numbers looked good. But then the real magic happened. She sent a gift basket to Oprah Winfrey. Now every entrepreneur sends stuff to Oprah. The chances of her actually seeing it are 1 in a million. But Sara didn't just send the product. She sent a handwritten note explaining her story. She explained the struggle, the fax machines, the cutting of the feet. Oprah's stylist tried them on. She loved them. In November of 2000, the phone rang. Sara was literally in the middle of quitting her fax job. It was Harpo Productions. They told her that Spanx was going to be one of Oprah's favorite things. If you know anything about business in America, you know that this is the nuclear bomb of marketing. Being on Oprah's favorite things is like winning the lottery twice in the same day. But there was a problem. Harpo asked, "Do you have a website? Do you have enough inventory to handle millions of orders?" Sara lied. She said, "Of course." She didn't have a website. She didn't have a shipping department. She had a box of pantyhose in her apartment. For the next 2 weeks, she didn't sleep. She scrambled to build a website. She called the mill in North Carolina and begged them to run the machines 24/7. When the show aired, she was sitting in her apartment watching the orders roll in. It wasn't a trickle, it was a tsunami. She went from selling fax machines for a few $100s a commission to making millions in a matter of months. But the money didn't change her hustle. In the early days, she couldn't afford advertising, so she became the advertisement. She would go to department stores, stand next to her display table, and stay there for 8 hours. She would literally pull up her pant leg and show women her own Spanx. She would talk to anyone who would listen. She realized that the department stores were putting her product in the hosiery section, in the back corner where nobody went. She fought to get it moved near the shoes, near the registers. She bought inexpensive racks from Target and sneaked them into Neiman Marcus to display her product better. She was breaking all the rules, but she was selling out the inventory. Year after year, the company grew. And here is the craziest part. She took zero outside investment. No venture capitalists, no private equity sharks taking a piece of her company. She owned 100% of it. Every dollar of profit went back into the business. This is unheard of in Silicon Valley or New York. Usually, by the time a company is worth $1 billion, the founder owns maybe 10 or 15%. Sara owned it all. She controlled her destiny. She expanded into leggings, into jeans, into men's products. Spanx became a verb. You don't put on shapewear, you put on your Spanx. That is the ultimate branding victory. But success brought new challenges. Competitors sprang up everywhere. Big corporations tried to copy her designs. They tried to undercut her prices. But they couldn't copy her story. They couldn't copy the authenticity of the woman who cut the feet off her pantyhose because she wanted to look good in white pants. Sara became a billionaire, the youngest self-made female billionaire in history at the time. She landed on the cover of Forbes, but instead of a stiff corporate photo, she looked happy, vibrant, different. Then, in 2021, came the moment that shocked the financial world. After 21 years of running the show alone, she decided to sell a majority stake in Spanx to Blackstone. The valuation? $1.2 billion. The girl with the $5,000 savings account, the girl who was laughed out of North Carolina Mills, had built a unicorn. But the most beautiful part of this story isn't the billion-dollar check. It happened the day the deal was announced. Sara gathered her employees, hundreds of people, mostly women, in a big room. She stood on stage, spinning a globe. She told them about the deal. She told them how far they had come. And then she said, I have bought 2 first-class plane tickets for every single person in this company to anywhere in the world. The room erupted. People were screaming, but she wasn't done. She said, and you're going to need some spending money for that trip, so I am giving every single one of you $10,000 cash. Tears, screaming, pure joy. In that moment, she wasn't just a billionaire. She was a leader who remembered what it was like to struggle for money. She changed the lives of everyone who worked for her. So how did she do it? How do you replicate this? First, you have to embrace the embarrassment. Sara says that her father used to ask her and her brother at the dinner table, what did you fail at this week? If they didn't have an answer, he would be disappointed. He taught her that failure isn't the outcome. Failure is not trying. This rewired her brain. She wasn't afraid to look stupid. You cannot be rich and cool at the beginning. You have to be willing to be the person dragging a red backpack into a boardroom. Second, solve your own problem. She didn't try to invent something for a demographic she didn't understand. She looked at her own life, found a pain point, and fixed it. If you are annoyed by something, millions of other people are probably annoyed by it too. That annoyance is a business plan waiting to happen. Third, trust your gut over the experts. The experts told her the packaging was wrong. They told her the name was bad. They told her the product didn't make sense. If she had listened to the experts, Spanx would not exist. Experts are great at telling you what has worked in the past. They are terrible at telling you what will work in the future. Fourth, visualization. Sara talks constantly about how she visualized her success. When she was selling fax machines, she would drive around and imagine herself on the Oprah Winfrey Show. She didn't know what she would be on there for, but she saw it clearly. She wrote it down in her journal. She mentally rehearsed her success long before it happened. And finally, leverage your constraints. She had no money, so she wrote her own patent. She had no marketing budget, so she used her own body as a billboard. She had no office, so she work from her apartment. Constraints force creativity. Having too much money at the start can actually make you lazy. Being broke makes you smart. Today, Sara Blakely is still innovating. She is investing in other female founders. She is teaching masterclasses. She is showing the world that you don't need a suit and tie to be a tycoon. You don't need permission. Think about your life right now. What is your red backpack? What is the idea you have been sitting on because you think you're not qualified? What is the problem you deal with every day that you could solve? Sara Blakely had $5,000 and a pair of scissors. That's it. She wasn't special. She wasn't lucky. She just refused to stop walking when everyone else told her the road was closed. The distance between the fax machine salesperson and the billionaire wasn't intelligence. It was persistence. It was the ability to hear no 1,000 times and still ask one more time. You have ideas. You have potential. The only question is, are you willing to cut the feet off your pantyhose? Are you willing to look crazy to everyone else until the moment you become a genius? The opportunity is there. It's hiding in the things that annoy you. It's hiding in your daily struggle. It's hiding in plain sight. Don't let the experts talk you out of your billion-dollar future. Pick up the scissors, make the cut, and never ever apologize for betting on yourself.